Welcome to Recovering Addict. I'm LT. I'm an alcoholic addict. I used to be anyway. But back in the early 2000s, I was a meth addict and got a felony to prove it. And actually, July 9th, y'all, I'm going to get my felony expunged.
Ooh,
I'm
nice.
going to court July 9th. And then later in life, later in my mid 30s, I became a raging alcoholic, had to seek help and treatment, went to rehab, started a nonprofit called Recovering Addict. And here's a little bit about that.
Hi, I'm Aubrey, and I'm a recovering addict. And before I found this program, my life was jail.
Not that kind of commercial. Recovering Addict is not your typical recovery program. This one actually works. We work on your bio. That means your body. And your psycho, which is your mind. And social. And that's dealing with relationships. So if you or someone you love...
Wait, what about spiritual?
Oh yeah, we work on that too.
Recovering Addict, Relapse Prevention Center. Visit our website at recoveringaddict.org or call us 801-695-3085. There we go. Hey, what's up? So we are live today here at Recovering Addict. Thank you all for tuning in. All three of you that are joined in right now, we have a special day today. We got an author and somebody close to my heart because she's a photographer.
Yeah.
We immediately connected. But she's written a couple of books. She's got an awesome story. We're going to get into that. And then we got Manny Lopez.
What's
Some
up,
of y'all
y'all?
know him as Manny Boy and seen his music online and a bunch of the events around here. He'll be at TOSA on July 4th, giving it up there. So how y'all doing? I'm glad you guys are here. You want to introduce yourselves? We'll come this way, and then we'll just get into talking about your past. And
Yeah, for sure. I am
Good stuff.
super happy and excited, honored to be here. We met at Fit to Recover
Yep.
about 2 years ago,
Yep.
and we were planning the event for Recovery Day in Ogden.
Yep.
And I feel like I connected with you right away.
100%.
It's pretty cool when we see our people, we know our people,
Yeah.
right? So my name is Manny Lopez. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what that means to me is that I show up when I say I'm going to show up, and my word has value. So for the longest time in my life, I couldn't say those things. I just lived a very toxic, codependent, and addicted-based life, and I was really comfortable with it. I went to prison when I was 17 years old, certified as an adult at 16 years old. I would get out of prison when I was 23 years
Real
old
quick,
for the
you guys
first
got a
time.
fan saying hello.
I know. Shout out to Michael.
What up, Michael? I wouldn't get out of prison until I was 23 years old, and that would be my pattern, in and out, in and out. So sometimes I've referred to myself as an 11-time loser because I've been in prison 11 times. And but for me, it took 11 times for me to have my divine intervention, that aha moment where I said enough was enough and recognized how much I had devalued myself and all the shortcuts that I took, and how everything that had led up to me being who I was in that moment has been my fault, and I couldn't blame anybody.
Have you ever struggled with what I like to call intellectual intimidation? So, and I say that from my experience, and I kind of feel it when you say you're an 11-time loser.
Mm-hmm.
When I got out of jail in the halfway house that I was in, and then I was just a stucco guy, you know what I mean? Speaking Spanish as a stucco guy, and I'd get around people that were smarter than me, and I would feel intellectually inferior. And it took me a long time to realize, no, you are smart.
Right.
You can do things. How have you been experiencing anything like that with that 11-time loser thing? And
I not when it comes to intelligence, but I think more like economically. Like just feeling like I come from such a different background than a lot of people.
What do you mean by
I've
that?
had less opportunities than a lot of people, and I've prayed and prayed and prayed for opportunity my whole life, and I would kind of be envious of other people because of the family dynamics that they had, the support they had, the opportunities that they had, and that was probably one of my biggest
So what it
struggles.
was like growing up? Like super poverty? Is that what you mean? Or your family?
Well, yeah, we lived what I would call poverty, very low income. my mom lost me and my 4 siblings to the state when I was 9 years old. But before that, there was a lot of drug activity in the house. Um, we would get our food from the food banks. My mom would send me to the LDS church to meet with the missionaries, and I would eventually get baptized when I was 8 years old to help pay the rent. It was those kind of things. And then taken into state's custody, I bounced foster home to foster home. Originally, I was in the same foster home with my brothers and sisters, which is pretty rare for a family to take 5 kids in. But I immediately started acting out and saying things like, "You're not my mom, you're not my dad." Sneaking out of the house, trying to encourage my brothers and sisters to do the same thing. I think in my mind, I was thinking like, if I act out enough, they will just send me back to my mom,
Oh,
or it'd be a pattern like I experienced with other adults. If I act out enough, then they'll just
yeah.
kick me out, throw me away. Um,
You're the oldest?
I am.
Okay.
And so what that behavior actually got me was shipped off to other foster homes by myself.
Oh.
And so I would bounce foster home to foster home, displaying these same behaviors until eventually I was 12 years old. And I had said enough was enough. I dealt with some physical abuse, some emotional abuse in some of these foster homes. And I decided I was just going to take my chances and I was going to find my mom. I didn't care how um, messed up she was, if she was on drugs or anything. Like, I would take my chances with her. See, there's nothing you could tell me about my mom growing up that would make me not love her. We just had a really strong connection. So when I was 12 years old, I was in a foster home in Lehigh, and I stole a bike from school, and I rode the bike back to Salt Lake. It took me all day. And I found my mom. Somehow I remembered my grandmother's phone number, and I called her. My mom just happened to be there, and
What?
she came, picked me up, and that would begin my life on the run, which would become a huge pattern for me.
So, because the state had custody of you, right?
Right.
And you left. And where were you in? From? Were you up here?
No, I was in Lehigh.
Oh, Lehigh. Okay,
Yeah.
Lehigh. Sorry. And you.
I did a lot of my foster homes in Utah County, one or two in Salt Lake County, and I also was in a foster home in Logan.
Mm.
I did a group home close to here in Ogden, and of course I ran from that because that would be my pattern.
So,
12.
12. Oh, okay.
So I bounced from my grandmother's house with my mom at whatever boyfriend's house she was staying at or motel she was staying at, and my aunt's and my cousin's house. And I got a taste of that lifestyle. And although it was dysfunctional,
Silent.
I wanted it
Record.
because there was connection.
Yeah.
And that I feel like that's what I was searching for
So you.
my whole life.
Yeah. Connection. Yeah.
Connection.
It's crazy how with my dad, I still don't talk to him. He's basically homeless in North Ogden somewhere, and super dysfunctional my whole life. Super manipulative. He's an addict, and I'm to that point where my dad, I can't talk to you. I'll meet you on these terms. If you want to go to a coffee shop and have a chat, that's fine. But I won't go to your. If we're gonna play cards, we're gonna play with my deck, kind of a thing.
Right.
And it's weird because they're just people like us, struggling, screwing up, and all that kind of stuff. But something about them, just because we biologically came from them, we just feel like we need their acceptance. And it took me a long time to get over that, for me anyway.
Yeah.
And you're chasing that right now, running from foster home to foster home, getting caught doing drugs, and
Yeah. Well, I feel like children will always seek out their parents.
yeah.
And that's what I did. So I'd never met my father. The only father figure I really had growing up was a stepfather who was super abusive, physically abusive to my mother, physically abusive to me and my brothers. Um, I have 2 younger brothers, 2 younger sisters, and it was really toxic. Um, when I came back to Salt Lake and was around my family, the drinking started. My uncles were teenagers and were really big into partying, and we're talking like big house parties. And we would be the nephews that would walk around the parties drinking the beer, and they would find amusement from it. and that would lead to a lot of destructive behaviors later on. Um, Seeing their like gangster lifestyle or what they portrayed as a gangster lifestyle, and then me buying into it, or some of my cousins and buying into it and thinking it was real, um, and then going down that path, and that would lead me to gang banging. And things like that. So when I was 16 years old, I was involved in a drug deal that didn't go the way that it was supposed to, and I ended up shooting my way out of the the house that I was in.
Mm.
It turned into like this robbery situation, and I shot somebody twice. I was actually under the impression that the person had died, and so I was scared that I had killed somebody, and so I was on the run, hiding. My mom actually told the police where I was, and they arrested me. They had told her, "Tell us where he is because he's considered armed and dangerous, and if he runs from us, then we're gonna shoot him."
Yeah.
And that was enough for my mom to say, where I was at.
Yeah.
And so they arrested me in Midvale, and I would be certified as an adult at 16, sent to prison at 17, and my gangbanging would really kick in when I went to prison. There was some of it previous to prison, just in the drug game and the lifestyle, but I would find connection with the gang lifestyle and the gang in prison.
That family
Right.
bond.
What I'd been looking for, I'd been looking for connection, connection, connection. Um, and growing up, like here, like as children, we it's hard for us to understand the difference between a healthy connection and unhealthy connection. I mean, we kind of can grasp it a little bit, but at the end of the day, like sometimes we'll take any connection rather than no connection.
Yeah. Wow. So we have quite the contrast here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm kind of in between both of you.
I
Like,
know.
'cause I grew up extremely poor, trailer park, lived with my grandma. My mom and dad were divorced when I was very young, and that had a huge effect on me. I remember at like 6 or 7 years old, but I didn't realize the manipulation my dad was playing on everybody, right? And then he's such a, for lack of better words, a loser still. And has us living with my grandma because he can't keep a job and all that kind of stuff. Moves us to Michigan and changes my name, holds me back a grade, and that's where I start getting really into drugs, start doing crank and all that kind of stuff out in Michigan. I'm just this little white dude that looks like I'm 3, because I'm a late bloomer kind of guy. And yeah, my crime life started, in my teens and drugs, and I went to jail a few times in Michigan. And by the time I was about 18, I'm on probation for some just stupid petty theft crap, And when my brother called me from Utah, he's like, "Get your ass home right now." Blah, blah, blah. And I told my probation officer, "I'm going to move back to Utah." And she said, "Okay, don't come back." Came back out here and nothing changed. I was just trying to party as much as I could, and then found meth. And
Different place, same behaviors.
Same me, yeah. And it was all I remember perceiving my life going, "Oh my God, 80 years I have to live like this. I'm going to be just like my dad." Like I thought I was him, like I thought my mom didn't want me because I was like him, and my whole life I'm going to be a loser because I'm just like him, and that took a while to get over. And so I just said, screw it, the F the world.
Yeah.
Let's get high, phrase. That was my motto.
Those become some pretty deep core beliefs.
Yeah.
Especially childhood experiences. Like we will carry those with us forever. Like I feel like I'm constantly trying to like find peace and get along with my inner child, the kid that I left behind, the lost, abandoned little boy that didn't get the attention that he was seeking or felt rejected or pushed away or thrown away. Like I'm constantly finding ways to connect with that little boy. And maybe I need to get a chemistry set like in the video like I had before. And
Crazy.
Yeah. Maybe that's what my cameras are.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So on the contrast side, what was your childhood stuff like?
It was a lot different. I'm the oldest of 7 children, and I was raised here in Utah on the outskirts of a small town. My dad was a Vietnam vet. He had PTSD, so he was hard worker, always had a business, a side hustle, animals, woke up early, kind of ran things. And my mom was a super hippie who didn't believe in any structure or rules. She didn't want, we didn't have to go to school. We didn't have to brush our teeth. We could just play and create. I think being the oldest, and having a kid every year and a half, the chaos in the home made, I felt frustrated. I would joke about it. I became the gang leader of those 7 kids, you know? But for me, my first real struggle was relationships. When I turned 13, I started wanting attention from boys. And my teenage years were pretty rough, but I had loving parents. I mean, they loved me, you know, I always knew that. And they were both hard workers. Neither of them struggled with addiction. When I turned 17, I found out I was pregnant with my first child. Single mom, moved out, thought if I married someone, it would all be okay. Married someone 10 years older, it wasn't okay. And then my parents moved to Salt Lake. So I had lived in this town and my life had been pretty small up to that point.
What town was it again?
Richfield.
Richfield, okay.
Southern Utah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we lived out in the country from that just because my parents liked to do their own thing. I would say my parents were pretty anti-establishment. Like if there's a rule, they're going to challenge the rule.
That the hippie in your mom?
Yeah, my mother, right?
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. He knows my mom.
Yeah.
He's my mom's therapist now, so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. But so things got harder for me before they got easier. I was married and divorced twice by the time I was 21. Was a single mother with 2 children. Had another child. Got pregnant again and placed him for adoption because at that point I was 23 and I was just old enough to know that my kids deserved better than what I was doing. After that, I became addicted to prescription drugs.
How did that happen?
Well, I started, the first thing that happened when I moved to Salt Lake is I became a photographer. That's where you and I were talking.
Yeah.
My uncle owned all those old school Kitty Candid studios in the mall, so I went to work for him.
Oh, no kidding.
Back in the day, yeah. And that gave me a little confidence because I was good at it, you know. And my mother was a wedding photographer. My grandfather and great-grandfather were both photographers, so it kind of ran in the family. I had dropped out of high school, so I wasn't, you know, I got my GED, but I think when I placed my son for adoption, I was so used to kind of powering through things. I would drink and party, and I smoked at that point. I was able to quit when I was pregnant, and then after I had David, I just felt so empty that I didn't. It was like prescription drugs. They prescribed them, and immediately I felt that emptiness kind of filled. And so
was it like antidepressant type stuff?
No, it was Percocet, opiates.
Okay,
Yeah, I started out with opiates, and back then you could get them prescribed, so I would use them as prescribed, and then pretty soon it was a lot more than that, and then pretty soon I'm on the street, and eventually that led to methamphetamine, which I know is a different drug, but it was just the crowds that I was in, and really it was just emptiness. I was just running, you know.
Yeah.
So I lost my job. I was gone all the time. Brought a lot of garbage into my parents' home because I was living with my parents. And
how old are you at this time?
I was 25.
25,
yeah. So my parents were LDS, but we were pretty non-traditional again. And when I was 13, I told them, I'm done with that. I'm not going to that, you know? But what happened for me was I came home late one night and I had an 8-year-old son, my oldest son, who really loved me. Like I can relate to this connection that kids have for their mom because my son just loved me no matter how messed up I was, you know. And he had been crying, waiting for me to come home. And when I walked in, my mom just looked at me and said, I can't imagine what it would take for you to change your life because this little boy loves you so much. Like, what would it take, Portia? How could this not be enough? And so that night, I took my son and I went downstairs and I just laid on the floor and I begged God to take it from me. Just said, I can't do this anymore. I'll do anything. And my son walked over and he goes, Mom, don't be sad. Why are you so sad? You know? And I said, Jace, I'm just such an ugly person. And he said, no, Mom, you're beautiful. And he pulled me over to a mirror and he goes, look, Mom, you're so beautiful.
At 8, he did that?
8 years
What a
old.
powerful moment.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that kid is amazing. He's 35 now, but I mean, it was a really powerful moment. It was a life-changing moment.
Yeah.
So I knew at that point, because I had tried to quit on my own, that I couldn't. I knew I didn't know how to fix it. And so the next day I asked my dad in total desperation where his LDS bishop lived, just thinking maybe this guy can help me. And he was a really cool guy. Went across the street. I knocked on his door and said, hi, I need help. I'm a drug addict. He's probably going, what? So he called a friend who went to AA, came and got me, took me to my first meeting, and that was the first time at that age that I knew that there was something wrong that wasn't just physical. Like it wasn't like I could just detox and get better. There was like a spiritual something going on inside me.
Yep.
So the man that had 2 years in the front of the room, I was blown away that he could get 2 years because I couldn't get a day, you know.
Seemed like a million years.
Yeah, I was like, how did he do that?
Yeah.
And he's like all lit up too, like he's recovering. I'm like, there's clearly something different between us.
Yeah.
And he gave me the big book and he said, you need to learn how to live a principle centered life. This is the answer. And so I started down that path. My bishop was really supportive. You have a good bishop when he'll tell you, you might be the most selfish person I've ever met.
Wow.
He shot me straight, right?
Exactly what we need to hear.
Yeah. People say, oh, and I'm like, no, he cared about me enough to be honest with me. He also helped me recognize that I was 100% responsible for the choices I'd made.
Oh, so I read a ton of self-help books, tons, from David Goggins to, you can name them. I've probably listened to them or read them. And it's like usually just 5 things. And they all say the same thing, just in a different way, right? And it's being 100% accountable.
Right.
Put yourself around people that are going to be completely honest with you. Yep. And then when they tell you, be humble enough to change.
Yep.
And then take action to change.
Right.
You know?
It's a really good way to simplify it. Yeah. And that's exactly, he made me some promises that if I did some simple things, my life would change. Yep. But he also taught me that principle of accountability, which is power. Yeah. It gives you the power to move forward. So I started to build a new life. Was the hardest thing. I thought it would be the hardest thing I'd ever have to do. It wasn't. Things would get harder later. But at that point, don't ever say that.
This is just part 1 of your story.
Don't ever say this is the hardest thing I'll ever have to do, because it could always get harder. But
right.
But the good news is that, and I don't know if it's good or bad. It's good. I met my husband, but Heavenly Father or God blessed us with way more than I could handle in a short period of time. So my husband, we've been married 27 years, which is amazing.
Beautiful.
Really
Very
great guy.
cool.
Yeah, really cool guy. And he's not an addict. I don't even know why he would date me, but somehow we fell in love with each other, and he adopted my kids. We got married, started to build a new life, and my photography business grew, and I was grateful. When you come back from that, I knew those dark places and built a house. And the thing about me is that I have kids really easy. So I had 2 more kids, like boom, boom,
Yeah.
and I was raising the older ones. They were in school, the younger ones running a business. And then I decided to build a new house to put the studio in. And then my back went out and I had back surgery. So relapsed. Yeah. I had 5 years clean and bam.
So the doctor prescribes you opiates.
Yeah, and I didn't say, hey, I'm a drug addict, and I've learned now. I just had a surgery, and I was like, don't give me the pills.
Back doors.
Absolutely. Yeah. I kept the back door open, but
Yeah.
not now. Now I'm like, I'd rather die than have that pain pill. Just don't give it to me, because
Yeah,
I can't climb out of those holes anymore.
No,
It
I couldn't
takes everything
imagine
from
going
you.
back to my old lifestyle.
I say, it took everything I had to climb out, and I'm just going to die sober. Like, I'm okay with death. I'm just not okay with relapse anymore.
We all have a relapse left in us, but we may not have another recovery.
Yeah. And
Right.
I just can't suffer like that anymore.
No.
you
Or
know?
put the people around us
Oh,
through it.
yeah.
'Cause the collateral damage is horrible.
Right.
During my meth addiction, luckily I was single and just running wild. I didn't have any kids yet, but later in life I had kids. I had him and all that kind of stuff. And the alcohol, because he's from another marriage of mine. And when alcohol was getting really bad, you didn't know who I was going to be when I walked in the door. I was either going to be the super fun guy surfing on the car in the woods or coming home slamming doors and just biting everybody's heads off, and he ended up leaving and moving in with his mom for a couple of years when he was 13 to like, when'd you come back? Like 15? Something like that. And just that collateral damage, the 2 upstairs, they were always scared of me. My wife, she went and got help before I did, because the family always hits rock bottom way before we do.
Yeah.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she went and got help on her own. And when she started to learn the codependent things that she was doing, not blaming anything on her at all,
Yeah.
the enabling that she was doing on, just that just comes with a relationship and that addiction.
Yeah.
And when she stopped the enabling behaviors, and the example I like to use is that me and her use together when we're talking to somebody to show them that they're enabling people is if I were to come home drunk, pass out on the front yard, and she opens the door and She comes and grabs me and puts me in bed, and I wake up and I don't remember it. So I don't experience the consequence, right? But if she sees me out there, passed it on the front yard, she's like, "Huh? You made your bed, sleep in it."
Right.
The next morning I wake up because the sprinklers woke me up or whatever. I come in and she's normal house. Kids are having breakfast or whatever, and I have to feel that shame. And she doesn't jump down my throat and, "Yeah,
Right.
you're drunk again." But I just have to feel what I just did.
Yeah.
And once she started doing that to me, it wasn't long. Like, I checked into rehab because I was, you just use yourself right into an isolated, dark hole of death.
Right.
Right.
Really good description.
Oh, I hate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I couldn't
So
imagine
rough.
going back to that.
Yeah.
So before we get to part 2, so you had experienced drug addiction, you're having children, married your husband, and then let's go back to Manny for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're in prison, right?
Yes.
Gangbang life is starting to suck you in on the
Yeah.
familia side of things.
Yeah, it did. It did. I was involved with a street gang from Salt Lake, when I went in, and I just continued to gravitate to them. Um, I learned a lot from them, and I appreciate a part that they played for me until it no longer served me anymore. Because at first they welcome you in and you feel a part of something and that family, the connection, and then slowly they start turning on you or trying to get you to do things you're uncomfortable doing. And some of the things you do, I saw a lot of people taken advantage of. I saw a lot of people beat up. I saw people stabbed. I participated in some of these activities, even though I was uncomfortable doing it. And I came to a point where I didn't want it anymore. And so probably like on my 5th or 6th parole, um,
Dang.
I would meet my baby mama, who I would end up getting pregnant and having my daughter who's running around upstairs. And when I had my daughter, that's probably at that time that was the longest I'd ever been out of prison, and that was probably somewhere around 12 months. So when I held my daughter, I knew that was the definition of family. That's what family was. That was connection. And I would like vow I will do anything to protect you and give you everything that I never had. And then like a month or 2 later, I would go back to prison. So I would, like, in the moment, I meant everything I was saying. But I mean, my addiction, my destructive thinking, my destructive behaviors took me another direction. And so I went back to prison. When I went back to prison and I was off the drugs and a little bit more clear-minded, I approached my gang and said, "Hey, look, I want out. I want to be a family man." And their response to me was to say, F your family.
This is your family.
This is your family. So get with the program. And the guy that actually said F my family was behind another gate. And me and 2 my gang members were in the main yard. And the one to the left of me said, "Do you have a problem with what he said?" And, well, yeah, I have a problem with what he said. And so I just punched him in the face. And then they proceeded to jump me, and I let it happen. I kind of like just gave up all control. And I got beat pretty bad. Like, they stomped me pretty bad while I was out. They were like kneeing me in the head. And eventually some other gangs had said, "Hey, that's enough." And I got up and I tell this part is like as much physical pain as I was in the moment, I had never felt spiritually free the way that I did.
Wow.
When I was walking back into the section, beat up, trying to hide my wounds.
So did they consider this your jump out then? Or?
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
And then after that, I'd get out of prison probably a few months after that and want to go be a father. And again, like, opportunity for me, like, I didn't have opportunity because first and foremost, I wasn't viewing anything that was going on around me as opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. And how we view what we do affects how we do what we do.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it didn't take long for me to find an excuse, because I can use anything as an excuse.
Yeah.
And so I was back in the toxic relationship with my baby mom and leaving my daughter with her mother instead of taking care of my responsibilities and more focused on that. And now, I mean, when we talk about toxic relationships, like me, super codependent. Like, I've worked on that big time. But at that time in my life, super codependent. Like if it wasn't a toxic relationship, I didn't want it. If you didn't abuse me and allow me to abuse you, then that meant we didn't love each other.
Mm.
And so the more that we did that, the more it communicated that I love you or you love me.
Yeah. I want to go back real quick to something I think we all three relate to. And I talked to Dave DeRocher a lot from the Other Side Academies.
Yeah, superstar.
Yeah. And he's just pounded into my head of why like a book physical or a clinical therapist really can't help us, because they have to try to help us based on the lies we're telling, right? Because they don't
Right.
have lived experience. We're talking about that really drawn line, right? And therapeutic communities, but you cannot manipulate your behavior. And we can say, I love my kid. And I did, and you guys all did too. Like, I love my kids. I love that. But the true honest thing based on our action is we loved our drugs more.
Right.
More than our kids. And I tell people that in our group when they're going through before they have their aha moment or whatever. I'm like, you love your drugs more than your kids. No, I don't. This is what you're saying, but what are you doing? Because if that's how you act, if you love them, I couldn't imagine how you would act if you hated them.
Right.
And that was us.
Right.
And so I always look at the behavior. I always like try to like see through or listen past it in my own mind, the talk that happens in my brain. It's like, no, what are your actions? Your actions is like the word love is a verb.
Right.
You know what I
An
mean?
action word.
Yeah.
There's action behind it. Let me tell you, the first time I met Dave DeRocher was one of those times after I got jumped out of the gang and I was back in prison.
Oh, really?
And he was coming to speak to some of the people in the high school of the program I was in. I was in a drug program.
So is this like
prison.
2016, 17?
Around there.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit later than that. I want to say like
Maybe.
17, 18.
Okay.
And the guy that slept right next to me had been in Delancey Street with Dave.
Yeah.
And was talking about this amazing guy that he knew, and he was going to go down to the high school and see him, and invited me to go talk to him. And so I went down there with him, and there's no running any BS on Dave. He sees right through it. Like he knows it.
Yeah.
And of course I probably started trying to run some game or play the part. And it came to my daughter, and he said, "Let me ask you a question." He said, "Do you love your daughter?" I said, "Yeah, with all my heart." He said, "Did you love her when you were in your addiction and on drugs?" Yeah, with all my heart. And he said, "Bullshit."
Yeah.
He said, "You didn't care about your daughter." He said, "You didn't give a F about your daughter. If you did, you wouldn't be here right now."
Yep.
And I walked out of that meeting hating this guy's guts. Like, how dare you talk to me in like where in a way that really is truth.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it, it was probably one of my biggest changes in my thinking and my behaviors was then, because I couldn't blame it on anybody else, and I could say I love my daughter because that was a lie. I was constantly lying to myself, to the people around me, and even to her.
Yeah.
And I thank him every time I see him.
Me too. He's
like, man, you played an impact in.
And it always comes to me when he has had a huge effect on the way that I run our groups at Recovering Addict. But in the book of Proverbs, right, it says that slaps from a friend are better than kisses from an enemy.
Right.
And that just, every time he talks, I'm like, he's smacking the shit out of you, but he's your friend.
Right.
You could have your little enemy over there telling you everything's all good. Yep. Giving you all those kisses.
Which is what I deal with constantly at where I work. It's where I work now. I work at Papillon Integrated Recovery Center. Shout out to Papillon.
Yeah.
And I get to be in groups and run some of these groups and see some of the clients, they'll jump in and try and save each other, or like you got this, you're worth so much more. And I'm like, nah, let's not try and rescue this person right now. Like, let's give some honest feedback. Let's challenge.
Yep.
They don't need to be rescued.
Nope.
Let's challenge them.
Let them feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I needed it. I needed to feel that. I needed the tough love. I needed people say, I don't trust you, and this is why I don't trust you. Yep. And you've said this over and over and over again, but you haven't done anything different. And your behaviors right now aren't different. The way you communicate right now isn't different.
You can't manipulate your actions.
Right.
Your actions speak louder than words, all those stupid old cliches.
Yeah.
When I was in rehab, I was 47 days in. I'm not buying it. My house was tore apart. So I lived in Pleasant View. I had a house up there, and I'm doing demo because I'm in a remodel, right? But I'm an alcoholic, so demo is about as far as I get. But now I'm sober and I'm in rehab and I'm going, oh my God, my house is trash. We're living in a motorhome in my driveway. And so I'm looking, all those are my excuses to bail, right? Actually, I was working on base at the time and I was meeting with this wingman advocate. He's actually a chaplain in the Air Force. So I was meeting with him weekly. And okay, now I got to branch off on this story. But one time I'm sitting there with this chaplain, right? And he goes, so you're drinking and all that kind of stuff. What about your wife? And I'm like, well, sometimes I'll swing into the liquor store, and we had like Life 360 or whatever. And she's like, honey, you don't need to buy that. And he's like, what would you say at those moments? I was like, I just ignore her and walk in. He's like, you're an idolatrous dick. And I was like, whoa. Needed to hear it, you know? And then
shout out to that guy.
Yeah. And then I'm in my rehab. I'm 2 months in and I'm looking for every excuse to leave. People are telling me, just don't. No, stick it out. Just stick it out, dude. You just, you know, this is a season of your life. This isn't your life. You'll get through it. The house will be there. You fix it later. So I take 3 shots of whiskey at like 47 days in. And every Thursday we had family group. And so Thursday we show up. I got me, the wife, the kids are sitting there. And it gets to this girl, Whitney. And she's like, hey, Felice, how do you feel about LT's relapse? And I'm like, I took 3 shots of whiskey. That was no fucking relapse. You know, I'm in control now. You know, step one, crap. I had it and I didn't drink it until I wanted to drink it. And when I drank it, I didn't go any crazier. You know,
I'm power. I am power.
Yeah, I got this. I just screwed up a little bit. And man, I had an old school therapist who's retired now. And he yelled at my wife for co-signing on all my crap and yelled at me. And he goes, let me get this straight. This is the reason because you're drinking. Because of this, you're here. You went to detox because of your drinking. You're in here because you're drinking. And now you're going to go and drink to prove you don't have a drinking. And it was just like, wow. It clicked, and I haven't gone back since.
Nice.
Good.
October 5th, 2019. There's my wifey right there. Hi, honey.
What's up?
This is Manny and Portia. Portia's an author. Manny's an awesome dude. Works at recovery coach and stuff. Where at?
I work at Papillon Integrated Recovery Center, so Papillon.
Okay.
Butterfly. The metamorphosis.
You know, yeah, and Felice probably knows you as all the music we've seen.
SL Manny Boy.
SL Manny Boy. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's always cool to run into you and your family at the events.
Yeah, they love you guys.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, where were we? What were we talking about? So you're
kicking ass in recovery.
Yeah. So you're jumped out of a gang.
I'm jumped out of a gang. I'm beat pretty bad, and but I'm feeling good about it. And I get out with this plan to be a father. You know, I feel like, okay, I took this part away, the gang, which I used as a crutch. But what happened was my life didn't get any better just because I removed that part. What happened is it got worse because I still had the codependency. I still had the addiction. I still had the destructive thinking and behaviors. And what I didn't have anymore was a crutch, the gang, to lean on anymore through tough times. And so what would happen was I would continue to go in and out of prison in those same behaviors, sometimes with the same baby mama and sometimes not. And eventually I would meet my wife, who you've met, and I clicked with her right away. I'm like, oh yeah, you're the one I've been looking for my whole life because you're damaged. I met her in a hotel. She was selling drugs, had people around her that were doing whatever she wanted whatever she wanted them to do. And I saw a damaged person. I saw myself. And my codependency was so bad that I would leave the halfway house, Nuke. I was at Nuke at that time.
Oh, yeah.
I would run from Nuke to spend one night with her. And then...
What year were you at Nuke?
This was 2019.
Oh, okay. I was in Nuke in like 2004.
Old school Nuke.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would go spend one night with her and then turn myself in the next day, and go back to prison for 4 months. And now she would stick by my side through this, which was something different. Because again, everybody throughout my whole life, parents, family members, foster homes. They eventually they leave or they push you away. But this person didn't, and so I felt deeply in love with her because of that. It's something that I've wanted all my life, and again, we'll choose the any connection over no connection. And so when I got out, she was continuing to do the same thing that she was doing when I went in, which is selling drugs and running the streets, in and out of hotel rooms. And so I would do the same thing. I was supposed to go to Odyssey House at that time. And instead of going to Odyssey House, we went to my parole officer and didn't let him know that the address that was submitted, that was approved, was Odyssey House, but just said, hey, that's a toxic environment and that's not a good one for me to go to. Let me change the address. And he allowed it. And so we walked out of there thinking like we were the smartest people in the world. We had game. We had, we had everybody fooled. And that would become my life on the run with her. And we basically turned our relationship into the 2019 Bonnie and Clyde, just running and gunning from Salt Lake to Tooele to Utah County,
ride or die,
up to Logan. Yeah, a lot of fraud going into banks and cashing checks and things like that. She was the hustle, I was the muscle.
Real quick, hey, if you just tuned in, we are with Portia Louder and Manny Lopez.
What's up, y'all?
You know Manny as SL Manny Boy from Salt Lake and his music, and he does it at events. Portia Louder is an author, and her story is crazy. We're about to tell you because besides, if you guys stereotype and how she looks, she's been to prison for like a long time. This is a crazy story. Right now we're talking about Manny. He lots of foster care, on the run, in and out of prison, in and out of gangs. He was jumped in a gang, and then he said, I don't want that life no more. He jumped out, but then he met his ride or die girl, and they're now the modern the modern Bonnie and Clyde on the run from the law. And that's where you have entered this story.
Shout out to Misty. I love you, babe. If you're watching. Yeah, I met and we really tore up the city.
Yeah.
It would end in, but throughout this whole process, again, the codependency and the toxicity was there. And so if you didn't abuse me and allow me to abuse you, then that meant we didn't love each other. And so we continued to do that to each other. We hurt each other. I left my daughter with her grandmother, and she did similar things with her children and their baby's dad. We really were all we had. We had each other. And then eventually the cops got sick and tired of us. And one day they tried to pull us over in West Valley by the Embassy Suites. And I was driving at the time, and I was like, I'm not stopping. And I would end up crashing the vehicle, but we would get away. And we would continue our toxic relationship. And during one of our fights, we separated. And I was in a stolen vehicle driving in Murray.
Where's the little girl?
Hi, sweetheart.
Can you come down here?
Come on.
You
can
come give us
over
a hug.
Okay. You want to come say hi to the camera and everybody that's watching? Okay.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
Hey, Link, to get you a treat.
She's having a blast. I was by myself, and I was in a stolen vehicle driving on the wrong side of the road in Murray. And I couldn't, at that time, I was really hooked on bath salt. My drug of choice was meth and heroin, but I wanted bath salt at that time, and I couldn't get anything. I didn't have access to anything else. But there was a liquor store right there by the Murray Hospital. And so I turned around and started driving on the wrong side of the road to try and pull in there, and didn't make it, and continued to go through the intersection. And I T-boned a van.
Oh, man.
And somebody pulled over to try and help, and I jumped out of my vehicle and brushed them aside and jumped into their vehicle, and I tried to steal their vehicle.
Oh, wow.
Now, luckily, and here's a God thing for me, it was they had taken the keys out of the ignition when they got out. And so I didn't continue this destructive path that could have hurt myself and other people.
Wow.
So I would pass out in that vehicle, wake up in the hospital, pass out again, and then wake up in the backseat of my parole officer's vehicle being driven back to prison for the 11th time. And that's where I had my divine intervention, my aha moment, where everything made sense that, Manny, you're responsible for everything that you are going through, for all the problems in your life, for the pain, for everything. Like, you can't blame anybody.
Yep.
And I think that's where my work really, really started, is I started to build from that.
What year was that?
This was 2000.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me. And so I started working on myself. My daughter was 3 at the time.
No, it wasn't 2000.
I think it was 2000. Oh, 2020.
Yeah.
I'm
Not
like,
2000.
Serenity is not
20.
20.
Yeah.
24.
So 2020 this
You
happened.
got some clean time, Maddie. I
Yeah.
didn't know.
I wish.
How much clean time do you got?
I have 3 years.
3 years? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going on. October will be 5, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Early 5. Never. Have you ever done a drug history? Like, where you write down, you just kind of bullet point it. You don't talk about what you did. You just talk about, from this age to this age, I was using this, from this age to this, from your first use to, and then you look at how much sobriety you have in between those moments. It's shocking. Like, I was high or drunk, more than I had stints of sobriety in my life.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Drug use history.
Yeah.
Even in prison, the addiction didn't stop just because I was in prison.
Yeah.
It was pills. It was even way before Suboxone was a thing in prison. It was meth and heroin.
Jeez.
I caught my heroin habit in prison. I had
Wow.
never touched heroin until I did heroin for the first time in prison.
Wow.
And I remember it was this guy who was kind of like my cousin that was bringing it in, and I had built a habit, and then he got moved to the drug program, and so all of a sudden the drugs were gone, and that was one of the worst times of my life, on the floor in my cell, puking and just sick as a dog. But that didn't stop me. I would continue. I'd get out and continue to get high and do heroin. And
So you're at your 11th time in prison.
Yeah.
You've had your aha moment and things are about to change.
mm-hmm.
Okay, let's stop there and go to Portia.
Yeah, well, my experience is a lot different. So I had never been to jail, and I guess because I had fought my way out of some hard things when I was younger, when I heard that I was under investigation for real estate fraud because I had this relapse, and when I start using drugs, I think I need to hustle too, and then I want to make money. Everything, I'd always thought, well, if I marry the right person, or maybe the drugs will fix me, or maybe, enough money will solve whatever I'm feeling, this emptiness inside. And so if we go back a little, I had rough younger years and then met my husband, and we started to build this new life. And then I relapsed with prescription drugs after my back surgery and get involved in these illegal real estate deals. Now, the real estate market was just booming. It was like 2005, 6, 7, 8. It crashes.
Right before the bubble.
Mm-hmm. And so first I'm just buying lots and flipping them. And I'm running my real estate business, and I have little kids, and I'm building a house. So I have a lot going on. My photo company,
Yeah.
right? And so it's a lot, a lot. And I'm making, when I flip a lot, I make $30,000. So that's like a huge win for me because I work doing a lot of weddings to make $30,000.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with buying and flipping lots, and that's how it starts. But the way that I'm thinking, and I'm using prescription drugs, is that if one lot's good, a whole subdivision would be better.
Yeah.
So I lock up a subdivision. I have to come up with the money to buy it, and then I'm in a hard money situation, so I have to make more money to pay these hard money payments, and then it just is a machine, and it just keeps going.
So how does that work? So are you talking hard money like a loan, or you get investors? Are you talking people out of their money to pay?
No. So the way hard money works is it's just quick cash that costs a lot of money. So an investor, like if I go to someone that's got couple $100,000 and they're willing to lend it, but they're going to want $10,000 a week.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's not cheap. It's super expensive. So you have to believe that the money, you're going to make a lot of money on this money. And I didn't know enough. I was pretty naive. So I'm thinking that I can buy the lots and get them sold in time, that there's enough profit there, but it didn't work like that. It was like all of a sudden I've got these lots that the payments on them are heavy, and I got to make more money to cover the payments, or I'm going to lose my down payment because the person that lent the hard money, they have first lien on these on these lots, so they can just take them out from under you and you lose everything.
Wow.
It's like a loan shark.
Yeah.
You know,
Payday loans on the corner.
it's like payday loans, but it's real estate. So, and they make sense if you have like a really good deal, you're going to make a lot of money and you need it fast. You can't get a bank loan quick enough, and you can't, like, banks aren't going to lend that much money on things, you know. So I'm moving fast, and at first
How do you find these people? Like,
good question.
are they on KSL or what?
No. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them out there. I mean, they're smart. It's not like they were dishonest. The people that are lending hard money, they're still available. They lend it based on the fact that if I lend this money and the person doesn't pay, I'm still going to make plenty of money.
Yeah.
And I go borrow the money based on, you know, if I can, there's enough profit in it that it makes sense for me to pay you and I'll still make money in the end. But I just didn't realize the way the timing would work. It wasn't as fast as I thought. And so I had some men introduce me to equity deals. So you buy a house, it appraise the first one they showed me, they said it appraises for $5 million, you can buy it for 2.5. And I'm like, well, if you could, why wouldn't you sell it for $5 million if it's worth $5 million, right? It doesn't make sense to me. And they're like, no, it's the appraisal. The appraisal's for more and you can borrow more. And I'm like, none of that makes any sense to me.
That's for somebody that wants to move in, right?
No, this is just somebody that's saying, why don't you buy this house and then you can turn around and sell it to somebody else and make some cash on it. And I'm thinking, but it doesn't add up that you would sell it to me for so much less if you can sell it, if it's worth more. So I'm not interested. And then they say, you know, you can borrow $1 million on that from the bank. Like it's an asset. And I'm like, so I'm paying 2.5. The bank's going to give me $1 million. So I'll owe 3.5 and the appraisal's 5. Is it really worth 5? Yeah. Well, how are you going to sell it for 5? Yeah, it won't sell for 5. Well, then it's not worth 5. Like none of it's adding up. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not interested, but then all my loan payments are coming due and I'm thinking I could use $1 million. So I go and I lock this one up. And then pretty soon I have investors reaching out to me saying, hey, I heard that you do these equity deals. Can you find me a house that I can borrow money from so that I can use that cash to put in the stock market or any other type of investment? So, so I become the middleman on these deals. And you know what? People ask, well, did you know they were illegal? Well, I felt in my soul that they were not a good thing to get into. Right. It felt really wrong. I didn't know they were illegal at that point because they were advertising, you know, these types of deals. A lot of the people that were advertising were now in prison, but you know, Franklin Squires, you had these big organizations that were doing that. So I just got involved in them, and you know, I'm using my integrity is getting weaker and weaker. And some of the things that I was charged for, misrepresentations on loan applications. Like if you say you make this much money, but you only make this. And at the time, the banks allowed those loans. They were called stated income. You tell them what you make. They don't verify it.
Isn't a lot of that the reason 2008 happened?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the reason 2008 happened. But the problem was I was just in the middle of a lot of these deals.
Yeah.
So, and I think I made people mad. There were realtors in town that were mad that they weren't getting the commissions on my deals. I was kind of just like, I don't need you guys. I'm doing my own thing. And
made some enemies.
And so when I heard I was under investigation, like it would have been a really good time for me to say, okay, so I made some mistakes. How can I make it right? I was not humble. I was not honest. I was like, not any of those things. And so
a bigger deal.
Yeah, no, instead I'm like, who do you think you are? You know? And I just handled it terribly. And I was scared. Like I really couldn't see how I could ever go to prison and recover from that.
Right.
Like my husband's not going to stay. I'm an active member of the LDS Church. I'm thinking, how does that look for me? And I've got children, and nobody even knows that I have this drug problem, and all of it's just overwhelming and scary. And so I just kept fighting, and I hired attorneys, and in the end, I made everybody mad. And the day came where I walked into a federal courthouse anyway, and I had drug it out and made it a lot worse than it needed to be.
Pride.
Yeah, pride. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that was probably the loneliest day of my life. It was a big shock to me to walk in there and have them say the United States of America versus Portia Louder, you know, and it's like my whole country. Like, who's going to take care of me? Where's my people? You know?
It's a fair fight.
Yeah, it's not a fair fight. I'm thinking I brought a butter knife to a gunfight. Looking at my lawyer going, they got a whole team of federal prosecutors. And I look back at my husband and my kids, and I just feel so far away. Just like, how could I have done this? How? And my husband's a great guy. My kids, it was just so devastating. Such a lonely moment for me.
So what do you know now that what were they going through looking at you on that side of the?
My kids were really traumatized by that. Like for the longest time after that happened, they couldn't even drive by the courthouse. Same with my husband.
Really?
I think at that point, my kids, and it was because of my attitude, was like they saw me as being treated poorly by the system. You know, what about banks? What? Because that was the position that I took. Like, and it was a really bad position for everybody. But in my mind, I'm like, why don't you go after somebody else? I'm small fry here. There's like all these big banks that are in on it. They're aware of it. Come on, you guys. Like, and it was, the
feds bailed them out.
Which is why they didn't. Which is why they focused
why they weren't
on you.
interested, because like I told my attorney, I said, I'm working with like the head people at Washington Mutual, and they're fully aware of what I'm paying and how much they're lending. They're like, they're not interested in the banks. I'm like, the banks are the problem, you know, or at least we're all equally culpable.
Sure.
But that didn't matter because it was my integrity. It's like you using drugs with 3 other people. Their integrity isn't the problem. It's yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to get to that point. So I think my kids were just in shock. I was in shock because I knew when I walked in, like the denial slipped away and I could see that the judge was going to sentence me to the max. He was going to give me the
that's scary.
Which was 0 to 7 I was facing. And before I walked in, I thought maybe a year. I don't have a criminal history. But the minute I walked in, I could see he's going to give me the max. And it was shocking. It was really painful.
Did you and your husband have a moment before you went, like, I'm here with you, babe?
No, I had this question. I speak to a lot of youth groups, and I had this question the other night, and they were like, "Did you think your husband would stay?" And it's interesting because Chad was with me that night, and we were talking about it on the way up, and he said, "A year before you went, I had made the decision. No matter what, I was all in." He's like, I knew that.
He's a solid guy.
He's a really solid guy, really good man. And so, here's what I don't know that I knew that until the day we stood in the courtroom. But I remember feeling the loneliest I had ever felt when I stood up and I said, it took my breath away. It was like to even speak, because the judge said, "What do you want to say, Miss Louder?" And I said, "Well, I don't know if I can talk." He's like, "We'll give you a minute." And he'd already decided what he's going to do. And I just said, I'm just so sorry to my community, my husband, and I know what you're going to do today. I said, I just ask for mercy for my family if there can be, you know. And then I sat down and he said, "Thank you, Miss Louder. I'm sentencing you to 84 months in federal prison," which is 7 years. Yeah.
Wow.
I remember turning around and Chad was crying. And he stood up and I had a 7-year-old little girl at the time. He handed her to our oldest daughter. And then he went to the podium. I don't even remember if the judge asked him to, because I remember the lawyers going back and forth. And then Chad just stood up and he had a really hard time composing himself. And he said, "Please give her time to say goodbye to our family. She needs it, please." Wow. And that's when I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
It was like a really tender moment for me to see this man that I had put through so much stand there and advocate for me.
Yeah.
And I knew we would get through it together. I knew that day. Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Touching.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he sentences you to 84 months.
Yeah.
Did he give you that time to say goodbye?
He gave me 8 weeks. Yeah.
Oh, to say goodbye?
Yeah, I got 8 weeks to say goodbye to my husband.
You went home for 8
I went
weeks?
home, yeah, and it was
different,
I
right?
know, different. I know, and I didn't get it. I didn't. Well, it's on
I was thinking you were gonna like give him some hugs, and you were gone.
Like, yeah.
No, it was 8 weeks. And the thing about that is, on a real estate, I had been out on pretrial release, so I hadn't been a flight risk. You know, they knew I wasn't going to run.
Yeah.
I have a family. Like, where am I going? You know.
Right.
So I just remember leaving the courthouse. The news was out there that day, and my lawyer looked at me and said, "You should have your kids go a different way because they're going to follow you, and you don't want your kids on the news." And so our oldest took our youngest, and Chad and I drove away. And Chad just kept saying, "Are you okay, Portia?" And I couldn't talk. Like, it was such a lonely feeling of how, like, I must be the worst person. Like, my whole country, they just gave me the maximums. It was just such a shock. And the other thing that blew my mind was how foolish I had been. Like, how I could have traded the most valuable thing I could ever have, which is time with my family, for money. It just blew my mind that I had been so foolish.
Yeah.
It was such a shift for me. And the last 8 weeks of the time that I got at home, I just appreciated those moments, the things I hadn't appreciated. I drove my son to school. I watched my children sleep, and I cried a lot, and my heart just broke. The thing that was good was that I reached out to my community at that point and said, my family is going to be, we're going through this. I just got sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Please support my family while I'm gone any way you can, So
How was that 8 weeks? Was that just
crushing,
yeah,
crushing?
the first thing that kind of pops into my mind is when I worked on base, and this does not compare. So this is a horrible example, but I had to work swing shift,
Right.
and I would wake up and take my kids to school and all that kind of stuff, and then I'd have to wait to go to work.
Yeah.
And that pit in my gut from noon till 3:30 or whatever till I had to be there.
Yeah.
I can imagine that like times a million.
Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. That I remember the last day I spent at home that night, I walked in and watched each of my children sleep, and I just sobbed. I just looked at their faces, and then I walked in and cleaned the house because it was like, this will be the last time I take care of my family,
Oh,
And I remember sitting there in the dark, and my sister, I'm pretty close to my sister Kira, and she called me and she goes,
Shout out to Kira.
Yeah, shout out to Kira.
Shout out to Kira.
And she just said, she was crying. And she goes, Portia, I know you can do this. You're the strongest person I know. And I said, I don't think I can do it, Kira. And she goes, Portia, Chad loves you so much. I said, I know he does, but I just don't know if I can leave him. And then she started to cry, and then I started crying. I said, I got to go, My mom, and Manny knows my mom showed up, and my mom.
Shout out to Chris.
Shout out to Chris. My mom literally couldn't watch it, though. Like, she came, and I said, Mom, I need to say goodbye to the kids. And she goes, I can't watch it. She walked away. It was just too much.
Yeah.
I remember my son Jackson was trying to keep it together. He's like, I'm going to take care of the kids, Mom. It's just the hardest thing to see.
They're doing math. We're not going to see Mom until.
Yeah, it was just unbelievably painful.
That was probably worse than the prison. I don't. Maybe not.
It was also bad. All I can say is this: it was crushing, and I built a new life on that pain. That pain crushed me. Yeah, getting to prison was. Chad dropped me off. I walked into a federal prison in Dublin, California, with 1,000 women. It was cold and scary and painful. People ask if I was scared. I'm like, oh no. Scared would have been like, I'd have had to climb up to get to scared.
Easy. Scared was easy.
Yeah. I'm like, bring me scared. I was so devastated, heartbroken. I had a bunkie that's like, you got to get out of here. You got to go. They're going to put you in suicide. And I'm just like, go away. Don't talk to me again. I'm like, you can't understand. All I could see was my children's faces, and the pain was just so devastating.
Yeah. The second time I went back to jail, I'd been to jail 4 or 5 times, but the last time I went, that I did my year, right? And this is where I got saved and all that kind of stuff. But I remember being in right before they send you to the main, where you spend those 2 or 3 days in lockdown.
Yeah.
And I was
Quarantine?
Yeah,
Like
whatever
quarantine.
it's called, RNO or
Yep.
or I can't even remember the names of it. This is 20-some years ago. But I wasn't a dad, I wasn't that, but I was an uncle.
Yeah.
And I remember laying in my cell, and I couldn't sleep, and I'm just sobbing and crying and thinking because their other uncle, my wife or my sister's husband's brother, was this good guy, electrician, played with the kids, and I'm the drug addict that's in jail, and I'm like, just the crushing weight of those first few days of being the worst uncle ever.
Yeah, I felt that, and I think for me, it was a turning point. So I reached out and I said this prayer, and I still consider it the most important prayer that I've ever said, which was, God, I feel like nobody to anybody. I have failed everyone in my life, and I'm in the deepest hole. I can't see my way out. I just need to know who I am to you. And I remember feeling the most incredible love I've ever felt, in my weakest place in that situation. And I could see that I had an important purpose on this earth. And I could see that every woman in that prison was so loved and valued, and that we're all connected. And it really did change me. you can do really hard things when you know who you are.
Amen.
For sure.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm all about doing hard things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so is he. I mean, I've been forced to do it. I think I have the skill of doing them, but I'm not all about doing it.
Not if I don't have to. I do stupid hard things. I don't know if you've heard or seen anything, but I'm riding my bike from Salt Lake to St. George.
St. George.
Oh, no.
In one shot.
I would not do that. I will not do that hard thing.
Yeah, we're trying just a publicity stunt type
That's right.
stuff. You know, I just want to put Utah on the map as the baddest recovery state in the United States.
right.
But it is, though.
It is.
It
Like,
is.
like Weaver County, Davis County, Salt Lake County, we all play so good together. All
Yeah.
the rehabs and stuff. We're just all for the community, man. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
There's nothing like the recovery community out here. I mean, I got people at the program that come from different states, and they tap into the fellowship with AA and things like that in the program and all these events. And they're like, everything is just so connected here. And we play well with each other.
Big time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in jail for your 11th time.
Yeah, prison.
So we're both at your epiphanies right now, right?
Yeah, the epiphany is
Portia
going
just walked
in.
in. You're in 11th time,
Uh-huh.
and now change is happening.
Change is happening. I get on the phone, I call to talk to my daughter, and she's starting to talk at this time. And she's saying things like, "Where are you?" And I got it. It just hit me. And I had to, and I really recognized, like I set the example for the type of men that she's going to allow into her life. And if I'm in and out of prison, in the streets, gang banging, doing all these things, the likelihood of her ending up with somebody like that is pretty high.
Oh, yeah.
And so if I really wanted to make a difference, then I needed to change. And now, okay, keep in mind, I'm fighting first degree felony, 5 years to life, attempted carjacking, aggravated robbery
Plus
for
your history.
plus my history. And so any other time I'd think like I don't have a snowball's chance in hell getting through this. But something told me quit making excuses and just work. And that's what I started doing. I started reading self-help, self-development books. I got myself into a drug program in the prison that focused on accountability. And I really started working on accountability. I mean, so often I'd been in that same program because I wanted the perks of being in the program, and I didn't take advantage of what was being offered, but this time was different. And so, I mean, one of the books that really helped me that I go back to all the time is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
It's a good book.
It taught me how to be proactive. It taught me how to like really think of how I wanted my life to be in detail. It helped me with my mission statement and all these things. And I just started practicing these things, and I started seeing results. And I would fight my charges for 17 months. And this was during COVID as well. So a lot of the court stuff wasn't going on. And so COVID actually helped me get out of prison because I got to push my court date out and push my court date out. And while I was doing that, I was just kept working and working and building and getting this certificate, that certificate, knowing that if I went to court, they sentenced me to prison, with me to prison while I was already at prison, which is usually what happens, and went to the Board of Pardons with whatever I pled to, they were going to lay me down. Easy 5 to 10 years off the top. My history is that's how it was going to be. And so I felt like I got to convince the judge how serious I am and that I'm a changed man. And so that's what I did. I worked on myself, and it came time so I ended up pleading to 1 to 15 years, a second-degree felony, and a 0 to 5 years, third-degree felony for stolen vehicle and failure to stop at the command of an officer. I would really put myself at the mercy of the judge. And the prosecutor...
Place to be, huh?
Right.
I never did that. The judge is giving me everything he can, so I'm just going to not acknowledge him.
I remember pacing in my cell before, like, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And this was one of those times where I had to really tap into my higher power and say, thy will, not my will, God.
Yeah. I got sentenced.
Help me speak my truth.
I was in Weber County getting ready to sentence on a 1 to 15, and this big ex-gangbanger from California pulled me aside and opened the Bible, and he read Jeremiah 29. I know the plans I have for you, and all that kind of stuff. And I went to, shaking in my shackles. And luckily they put me in the UCC, gave me another chance on probation, and that was it. I was done. No more of that lifestyle.
That's all you needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you say when you got up to the judge?
I was so nervous. I was so nervous. I looked.
A drink of water.
I looked at the judge. So keep this in mind as well. The prosecutor gets to speak before you speak.
Yeah.
And so the prosecutor's bringing up my history and everything. And me and my wife, shout out to Misty again, because we're co-defendants on these cases.
Oh, man.
And so she's not only saying this is why he doesn't, but this is the people that he surrounds himself with.
Yeah.
This is why we shouldn't let him out. Like, look at what he's done. Let's just sentence him to prison and let the prison deal with him. And so I looked at the judge and I said, I can't speak to any of my history or anything like that. Like, that is what it is. But this is what I've done since I've been here. I presented all these certificates, these letters from people in the program, staff members, even some of the lieutenants and some of the officers that saw a change in me. And I presented myself as a changed man, and I asked for a program. I didn't ask to be probation or anything like that. I said, I need a program. Like, I have done prison time after prison time after prison time, and nothing has changed. And if what you want out of me for this is time, then that's all you're going to get, because I have programmed and programmed and programmed. And he paused for a good 20, 25 seconds, just looking dead into my eyes. Like maybe he was like searching my soul or something. And then he said directly to me, he said, "Mr. Lopez, you're right. All you've done your whole life is time, and time has not served you well. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sentence you to prison on these charges, but I'm going to suspend the sentence, and I'm going to give you 36 months probation. You are going to go to a treatment center, and if I see you for any reason, I will do everything in my power to give you every day of your time." And like that, life changed for me. Somebody, just like when I met my wife, somebody saw something in me. Somebody believed in me. This man believed in me. He was giving me an opportunity, and there's no way that I was going to, not take advantage of that or spit in that man's face.
Praise God.
And so life moved fast after that. I went to the board for my parole violation, which I was in prison for, and I was already past my matrix on that about 2 weeks after that, or 3 weeks after that. And then I got out 2 weeks after that, just real fast. And I was trying to go to a program that would allow me to do what I want. There's, again, me trying to control things. And they had a COVID outbreak there. And so the program that accepted me was Odyssey House. And so I ended up going to Odyssey House. And it was where I needed to go, because I needed that in your face, open confrontation. I see myself best in the eyes of a peer. Therefore, my peers must open their eyes and speak honestly about what they see.
Yeah. That's not to cut you off, but my ride that I'm doing is based on that peer support is better than clinical therapy. Not that there isn't good, motivated people in that field, just the models of each.
Okay.
You know,
Well, I hope you see the benefits of both.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And that's just coming from a perspective, like I work clinical. I work clinical and coaching. I'm part of
You're
both.
a peer, bro. You've been there, done that.
Right. Which what helps me.
Yeah.
And that's what helps me when I work with people is like, I know your pain, you know my pain. Like, we connect.
Yep.
Like, I've been there. And it really helps me when I'm in these therapeutic sessions, because I have a caseload of 10 individuals I meet with every week and do individual sessions with. And then I teach 4 groups a week that are 3 hours each.
Dude, you're such a good dude for that.
Thank you. And I love it. It's therapy. It's therapy for me.
Yeah.
Super therapeutic. Like, I go in there and I tell the guys, like, I don't think you guys know how much I get out of it when I walk out. Maybe sometimes, or a lot of times, most of the time, more than you are.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just based off my willingness where I am right now. And when you find that willingness for yourself, it is just going to change for you, and you're going to experience that. It's like experiencing that spiritual connection. Like, it's there.
We've had a couple graduates of our program, because it takes about 1.5 years to graduate
Okay.
my program. And there's a kid in there who's about to graduate now. And when he walked in, he was pale gray, opiate addict. His mom was dropping him off and watching him the whole time he was there.
Yeah.
Now he's successful. He's a manager of a store. He's got his own car. He's got a little girlfriend along. Last Wednesday and Thursday, I couldn't be there because I had to do some work. And he was my go-to guy, like dependable, reliable.
Yeah.
He's strong and fit. He's just there stoically, and I love bragging about him. There's another girl that I could brag about like this too, but they walk in and who they are when they walk in is not who they are today. Absolutely. And that just lights a fire in me. Like, oh, I love it.
It's beautiful. It's one of the most beneficial parts of my job is seeing that process, and I'm seeing them change and I'm seeing them grow. And, yeah, it's amazing. And to know that I got to play some small part in that
Divine collisions.
It's very fulfilling. And that's a different kind of validation. That's not that external validation that's temporary. That's internal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, dude. I'm right there with you. So you're in prison.
Yeah.
You got 5 years. How'd you get through 5 years?
Okay, so the first year was denial.
Sunshine and rainbows.
Just being honest.
Yeah.
I'm not sticking around. I got a lawyer that's going to get me out. Everything's fine.
I won't be here much longer.
Yeah.
I'm different.
I'm different than everybody else. And then, and see, I'm blogging too. So I'm still focusing on what everyone else is doing wrong. The guards, the this, the that. So they're like, yeah, we're getting tired of reading your stuff online, Louder. And I was like, well, you can open the door and let me out. And they're like, yeah, we're going to open the door to the shoe and let you in. So you know how that goes.
Yeah. Secure housing.
Yeah. So I got to spend 30 days in the shoe. Then I got transferred. I went to Minnesota. I think when I got to Minnesota, my heart kind of broke because it was so far away from my family.
And that's where you're okay.
Yeah, I spent 3 years in
home,
Minnesota.
kinda.
That was my new home. That's when reality started to kick in that, yeah, you're going to be here. And I started looking around and noticing that there were a lot of people in denial like me. And a lot of them were white collar. Like they're people like me, pretty smart people that have had pretty privileged lives that think we're different than everybody else and that we don't belong here. The government's worse than us, which might be true, but I'm just saying.
Facts.
Yeah. But at that
Big
point,
facts.
I'm looking around and I've got, what happened was I had a friend that came from Utah. Her parents were both heroin addicts. She grew up homeless on the street, went to school when she did from the backseat of a car when they had a car. And I was like, I can't believe they did us this dirty. And she looks at me and she goes, I'm a drug dealer. Drug dealers go to prison. What's your problem? That's why we're here. We screwed up. And I thought, why is it so easy for her to own her stuff and so hard for me, you know? And then I saw a girl get up and take full ownership of why she was in prison in a class I was in. And I was like, I want that power in my life. And I started down that journey of freeing myself, taking ownership. So I made like in the 12 steps, you know, the inventory, well, this was like a spreadsheet inventory. Like it took me 6 months of rewriting my life and really identifying from the beginning where I had been dishonest, like sex, drugs, lies, you know.
The fourth step, basically.
It was, and it was a solid 4th step. It was 18 pages, I think.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I had the time to do it. So things that I was never going to say out loud, I put on the paper. I asked a group of girls to go to the rec yard with me and I said it all out loud. And I called the people that I'd hurt and I told them to. I remember just saying those things out loud. It was almost like I moaned it. It hurt so much. It was just like the pain inside me from the pain I'd caused others. And about that time, my kids came out with my husband and kids. And my kids were a lot older. They were growing up fast. And because I left when they were 7, 12, and 14, the ones in the house. And so, they're going through hard things.
Yeah.
Yeah. My 16-year-old son, I saw this chip on his shoulder.
Sure.
My daughter's depressed and angry. And I'm like, I look at him and I go, you do realize you're hurting because of me, right?
My fault.
Yeah. I did this to you. And they're like, Jackson's like, effing cops. It's not you. And I'm like, no, honey. No. Like
boys love their moms.
Oh, they do. Yeah, my boys could never write me the letter and tell me how I hurt them, but it was they couldn't. My girls, 22 pages. They got a whole the spreadsheet. They took that to but they needed to.
Sure.
I hurt them, and they had a right to be angry. But what I think you have to realize as the person that's in that place is that I didn't want my children to grow up thinking the system did me dirty, because I don't want my kids to grow up feeling like a victim to the system.
Sure.
I don't want them to get caught up in the system, you know? I want them to, as painful as it is to take ownership and tell your kids, I did this to you. That's where you start to build a new life.
Yep.
It's based on truth.
Yep.
And until they can express their feelings and how hurt they were, and that takes time. Like I hear people get out of treatment, my kids won't talk to me. I go, what? You used for 10 years and you've been home a month? Like, come on, you know?
We all want to parade after.
Yeah,
30
we
days,
want
don't
everybody to rah, rah, rah.
Man,
They're just waiting for us to
I
go back.
see it.
Yeah, and that's not real. My daughter took 2 years. I wrote her letters every week and she didn't open them, you know? It's not real. So
Just unplug it for a second.
So what I think for me, that was a real big turning point, like getting so brutally honest. I didn't realize it would do this, but what it did is it really opened my soul. Like
Yeah.
I was able to completely start to connect.
Yeah.
It gave me power. I stopped feeling like I was imprisoned. I started feeling very free. I started seeing how I had the right to choose my response in every situation. What someone said to me, it was my response that mattered. That was my power. And it felt really good. And I would say by the end of my sentence, I felt better about myself than I've ever felt, you know?
So you got out a little early then.
Yeah. I did a drug treatment program that was accountability based. I was a leader in that program. And so I was calling people out and getting threatened sometimes. And
Hit record.
and I think that program was life-changing for me. Taking ownership, life-changing for me. Walking through the pain, being willing to face that pain and experience it. And then I started connecting in such a deep way with others and realizing how fortunate I was to have the life I had.
Yep.
And hearing other people's stories and seeing the strength it took for them to climb out of the places they were in that were much deeper than mine, and just having so much joy. You know, I mean, Manny spent a lot of his life without a phone, so he sees the world different than kids that grow up with phones, right?
Sure.
I got 5 years away from a phone. I mean, I consider that a huge win. That my
Really?
brain, oh yeah, because I would read and I would walk and I spent time in nature, and it's like that's so healing for your soul. You know?
I agree.
Yeah. So,
Constant distraction, huh?
it is, and I think by the time I got out, I mean, it was pretty surreal when they call your name. You know, for me, I
Roll
watched.
up.
Oh yeah, they call it over the speaker louder,
Yeah.
and I walk out and I got a little box with letters and all. What was really cool though, well, all the women came running out cheering for me when I walked out.
Oh,
which was
wow.
pretty amazing. Like my heart was so full. Chad was waiting out there with flowers for me, which is amazing. Yeah, pretty dang cool.
Chad, he's such a good guy.
He's such a good guy. And like seriously, just holding Chad's hand was the most exciting thing. Like I say, like still when I hold his hand, I get excited. Like
Yeah.
I just love this person. We've been through so much together. I did not know the beauty. I couldn't imagine how beautiful my life would become. That work that I did, the ownership that I took. I was 43 when I went to prison. I'm 52 now. It's kind of scary to reinvent
great.
yourself. Thanks.
You're welcome.
But to reinvent yourself, you know, I didn't know. I'm like, I was on the news. What am I going to do when I get home? All of it's scary, right? But I came home. I didn't hide from it. I was pretty open about that. For me, it was like, how can I pretend I didn't go to prison when my whole life changed in such a beautiful way?
Right.
Like, how do I come home and hide from that? I got to acknowledge it. And if you go to college, you don't pretend you didn't. Like for me, my whole life, you know what I mean?
Right.
I expected everyone to cheer me on when I got home. I'm like, I'm back. And everybody did. So it was cool,
That
you
is
know?
cool. Do you guys have a Bible verse that just resonates with you in your experience?
I can do all three things through Christ.
Mm.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm saying that right now, and all kinds of things I'm trying to do. I'm like, I don't know if I can do that, but I know I can do it with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One that and I bring that up so I can bring mine up. But Romans 8:28, and it says, "And we know that God causes all things to work together for good, all things to good for those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose." Right.
Right.
And that verse is just imprinted on my mind. And I actually, if you go to my Bible, I have my son's name written on it. Because to completely own the fact that I was a piece of crap alcoholic and everything fell apart the way that it did, all the way to my son being crushed to almost death.
Devastating.
Right. There was a point in time where the the doctors you don't see at primaries, they were in the room, like the big smart ones. They made a case study out of him and all that stuff because of how severe his brain damage was. And One weekend he came in and was like, we got to fix the fractures in his face. And in order to do that, we need to put a trach and a feeding tube in him. And if we put a trach and a feeding tube in him, we're providing life to this. And at that point, he's just vegetable, straight vegetable.
Can't even
and he's like,
that.
so this weekend, I want you and your wife to go. And we were staying at the Ronald McDonald House. And at the Ronald McDonald House, I'm sneaking in alcohol and getting drunk every night.
Yeah.
Piece of shit. And he says, I want you guys to go back and contemplate pulling the plug.
Oh, my goodness.
Because we don't think there's much hope for where this kid is right at the moment. And we have to either provide life by fixing his face, or let's let him go. Yeah. Heaviest weight of my life. And to own that this is all my fault, you know. Felt like I was being punished, you know, all that kind of stuff. We come back that next Monday, and the doctor goes over and takes Link and squeezes him on the trap, like a good squeeze. About a minute, 30 seconds later, he kind of does one of those. And he's like, that's a good sign. So he's like, let's give him a chance, you know. So anyway, I feel you. It's tough.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're with your story. Back to you.
That's intense stuff, man.
No,
I appreciate the authenticity.
Yeah. It takes next level courage to face the stuff we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
It takes next level courage. Yep. And there's such a reward for doing it, not just for us, but our family, and then the generations and the people that we touch. And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that when I got home from prison, I felt that so deeply, the love that I felt for the women that I met. You know, I went to the halfway house and I felt totally empty, like, where's all my people? And it was kind of cool because there's some guy walks in, because I hadn't been around men, you know, for a long time, and I'm sitting there on the couch like this, and he goes, are you okay? And I go, no, I feel so weird. I want to go back to prison.
Institutionalized.
Yeah. He goes, well, I saw your husband and your daughter, and they're so sweet, and you got a beautiful family. You're going to be okay. I'm like, I don't feel good. And he goes, you know what surprised me the most about prison? And I go, what? And he goes, mayonnaise makes everything taste better. And then all of a sudden I just started to laugh, because there was somebody that knew how bad the food was, and that mayonnaise really did solve the problem, you know? And it was like, I got to stay connected to this part of my life. And when I got home, first I went to work in drug treatment. That helped me stay connected. I stayed connected to the women I met. I started meeting people like Manny, staying connected to that. Wrote my first book, sent it into prison, it's just like, it was all from the heart. Yeah. It was from that soul place, because of that pain, that you want to turn into something beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with what you're doing and what Manny's doing. And then that's why it's like, I don't know. It's too beautiful to not talk about.
Romans 8:28.
That's right. All things for the good.
All things are good.
It's amazing that we're all sitting here. The collective amount of pain and goodness in the room is kind of incredible.
Yeah. What I was trying to get, that was the point I was trying to make, is what he went through and our family went through during that time. And God bless my wife's heart for sticking through it with me during that. Cause he comes home from the hospital and I'm still a blackout, belligerent drunk, and she's feeding him through a tube in the house, and he's just severely brain damaged. I mean, he's doing tons better now.
Sure.
But where we are at this exact moment,
miraculous.
All things for the good.
Yeah.
And you can't imagine it when you're going through it.
No.
How long did it take you to get acclimated back to home?
I've been home as long as I was gone now, almost 5 years. The first year, I was still, what I did it different than Manny. Like Manny, he's like, I don't want anything to do with prison. I came home and I bought 4 brown t-shirts, the same as I had in prison. I bought 1 pair of shoes. I did everything.
Did you get some ramen noodles and hide in your bedroom?
I didn't like ramen noodles, but I was a big fan of almonds and tuna fish, and I bought the exact same kind, because I was just like, I want to be safe, because here I found myself. So for Manny, he's gang involved. For me, I find myself in prison. It becomes my reprieve from this outside world where I was such a hustler and a drug addict, and then I go in and I find myself, and I feel like I never want to lose that.
Bring it home.
I got to come home and do the same. And now I feel safe to wear some different clothes.
Oh, wow.
Big changes. See?
That's awesome. I'm like you. I'm like, I don't want.
Yeah, he's like, I don't
want to go back. I don't want to eat that food.
Yeah, get that blue off me. Like.
Yep. So yeah, that's how it went.
So now you've written 2 books. Tell us about these books right here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Living Louder was
like
my
Johnny Carson or
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Living Louder was the book that I wrote when I was out for a year, and it's kind of my journey from, going into prison, the feds, all of that, and then it ends when I get to the halfway house, and it's people that I met along the way, and it really was just a divine download from Heavenly Father. It's like, oh, you want me to write a book? Okay, because I'm like a high school
Divine
dropout.
download. I like that.
It was just like boom. So I was like, and so I wrote it. And then I published it and sent it into my friends in prison. And it just kind of, I'm so glad I did, because I look back and I'm like, I mean, I had a lot of content because I was blogging from prison and all that.
What were your blogs about, real quick?
Well, they started out about how messed up the guards were. Of course.
Which didn't help.
Didn't help my, yeah, it
For
didn't.
prison time.
Put a target
My
on your
first
back,
year was
huh?
rough. That's why I got transferred. Right. So I was still a little rebellious.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
They're like, why are you at war with us, Louder? We didn't do anything to you. We're just housing you. I'm like, well, you can let me go then.
Can you
I don't
believe
know.
what he just said?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to put that in the blog. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I remember one lieutenant saying, "You're gonna make things a lot harder on yourself than they need to be here." And I said, "I know you didn't mean to say that, right?" And he looks at me like, "She's gonna go right."
Oh my gosh. That's awesome.
Yeah, I had an attitude, but
Threatened
yeah,
by.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but then I went to Minnesota, and that's when I realized I'm my own worst enemy. I'm at war with myself.
Yeah.
It's not anybody else. So I started to do the work, and my blogs became a lot more about that inner journey and the women that I met and those experiences. And some of them were so cool. When people ask what was prison like, I say really boring, really long, but some really cool things happened, and I was able to capture those and put them in a book. Born to be Brave it starts out again, kind of a recap of what happened. I used that title because the day that I was sentenced, my dad looked at me and he goes, like, I just get sentenced to 7 years. And my dad goes, "Well, you'll be okay, Portia." And I'm looking at him like, "What, Dad?" And he goes, "Maybe if it was one of my other kids, I'd be worried." He goes, "I'm not worried about you. You were born to be brave." And I was like,
Really?
okay, which is cool, right? Because what
Yeah.
he's saying is, I don't feel sorry for you. You're tough. Go do this.
Yeah.
Which I know kind of seems insensitive, but my dad's a pretty tough guy. So I'm like, if my dad believes in me.
Shout out to
we can
Cliff.
accept- Shout out to Cliff. Cool parent. So yeah, and then there's some. Manny's story is a big key part of that. When I met Manny, it's been not just blessing for me, but my family, because of his experiences. He's been able to really support my family, and it's pretty special.
Yeah. How did this relationship here kick
Okay,
off? And what are we doing?
It's so like we're like
we're the odd couple.
right. we're two sides of the same coin.
Right? Yeah. I call it like
The recovery odd couple.
Your recovery. It's a soul relationship. Like when you meet someone and you know that you knew them before you came to Earth, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so we just found each other. Now we better just figure out what we're here to do. So, when I heard him on Casey Scott's podcast, Project Recovery, I was on it and I watched.
I've been on it before.
Yeah. So
Shout out.
shout out to Casey.
Yeah,
Love Casey. But when I saw Manny's story, I was just blown away, and it touched me really deeply. And I was going into detention centers. I go into youth detention centers and into jails and speak. And I do a lot of speaking for the LDS Church. So I actually go to the missionary training center, and then I go to jails, which is really cool. And I share my story at the MTC. Like, they want to hear the truth in all these places. And so when I saw Manny, I called him up and I said, "Hey, I want you to come to the Salt Lake Detention Center with me and speak to the kids." And he's like, "Yeah, I grew up in that detention center. Like, that was home for me, you know?"
Wow.
So
Cool.
that
I
was
wasn't on the run. I was living in the detention center.
And so you've been speaking to kids at that detention center?
Yeah, he went back and spoke to the kids. It was probably the most amazing. I've never seen someone connect with kids the way he did. And then after that, I said, "I need you to mentor my daughter, maybe my nephew." And we just started down the path. And then we do a lot of speaking gigs together, and just,
Very cool.
yeah, family. Like, we're super close.
Yeah.
So,
That is
pretty
awesome.
neat. Yep.
Just
Praise God.
building stuff together.
Yeah.
Awesome. So your current life situation, how's that all going with recovery and what you're doing in the community? And
So I love what I do. So when I got out of Odyssey Residential and I went into outpatient, I started doing construction cleanup at the airport.
they let Met you near the airport?
Yeah, I guess they have a background check process now, but now that it's almost finished. But to pick up trash, they were letting me do it. And I coming out of Odyssey, I knew what I wanted to do, and that was work in recovery, because I became a leader in the program in the prison and in Odyssey, and I figured I'm a pretty good leader, and I go a good direction. And so what I started doing was I started acting as if I presented myself as if that's who I am in that moment. And so when people would come up to me, I was talking recovery, especially there's a lot of people on that job site that were getting drunk the night before or coming to work high. And I'm just talking recovery. They're trying to talk that BS, and I'm talking recovery. Good. And,
you were the adult in the room.
Yeah. I took a week off with my wife, and we went and did the training at USAR to become a peer support specialist. Yep. From there, we shopped ourselves around, and I landed an interview at Papillon and killed the interview and waited for that call back to say, come on, and it never came. And one thing that I learned throughout this process is how to advocate for myself. And so I called them and I said, hey, I didn't hear anything back. Here's why I'm an asset, and kept that interview going. They called me in for a second interview, and I killed that interview too. Boy. And they didn't call me back again. And I wasn't taking no for an answer. And I was like, I'm meant to be here. I'm meant to do this. And so I followed up again, came in for a third interview, and that's when they hired me. And I became the house manager for the 4 male sober living houses. And then my wife became the female house manager for the female house, and got myself back into school. I'm currently working on my degree in human services with a concentration in substance use disorder. And by doing that, it allowed me to be a part of the clinical team at Papillon. And now I do therapy work with the clients, and it's a relatable therapy that is really beneficial for both of us. I also started my coaching business called Clean Streets Consulting and Coaching, which I do self-development and recovery coaching through. I've had the opportunity to work with Portia's daughter, CJ. Shout out to CJ. You're amazing. Yep. Lookout World. She's on the road. That's right. Cool. And her nephew and different people in her family. And it's been really rewarding. And it's a whole different type of internal validation when people are like, hey, I want you to help me. Yeah. And or displaying, they view me as an asset. Yeah. That I have value.
Sounds to me like you're very successful.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I am. Me and my wife, we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. I was fighting for custody of my daughter. Her grandmother had guardianship over at the time, and it was about a year process, and it was a rough process. And at times I wasn't allowed to see her and different things. But I stuck it through. I learned to follow through and finish what I start. Yes. Even though sometimes in that process, it's really painful. Just follow through. Don't give up. And now I have custody of her right now, and she's running around your house.
That's so cool, dude.
And then my background came back, and they said that we had to move out of our apartment. It was in Cottonwood Heights, really nice area, and we loved it. But we had to figure something else out. So we started looking around, and
thanks for paying your rent on time. You guys have been great.
Yeah.
We just found something out.
Right. So we start looking around, and it looked like the only ones we were going to get approved for were like the low income, drug behavior, criminal behavior. And this was a time for us to.
These are the models that I talk about when I start, like the model's broken.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this is where we tapped into our spirituality and our connection with God. And my wife said, how about we pray and let God direct us where he wants us?
Amen.
And that's what we did. We prayed. And then she's like, hey, tell me which way. And I would say left here, right here, go forward. And looking for a sign. And there was a sign in a lawn. And we applied, and we got the opportunity to move into a 5-bedroom home in Sandy.
Yeah.
And
Real quick, Amber says, you definitely have value in our community. Is lucky to have you, Manny. You are a great example of bringing an example of walking the talk and going after your dreams.
love you, Amber. You're amazing. You put on an amazing event for mental health. It was dope. Can't wait for your next one.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Amber.
Yeah. She's amazing.
That's cool.
And so but so much more came out. We have our kids, we have the boys as well. They're teenagers, and you talk about, the stuff that you experienced with Link and we go through some similar stuff as that. More my wife does, and I'm just there to support her through that process. But one of the boys, he goes to primaries every week, and we just found out some other news that he's going to be struggling with some other things, and so we work through that. But we are at a point where we can be present for something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's beautiful. I get to be a father, and this little girl and these boys, they look at me as an example, and that's so rewarding. I reconnected with the community, and I said, you know what, like, I've worked on myself in these areas, and let's get back into spirituality. And now I'm back in the church, and I was so nervous to go back to church because I was so different from the 8-year-old boy that got baptized.
Sure.
And I got the tattoos and the crazy hair, and so walking in, I didn't know if I was going to be escorted out. Yeah. But in my community, they welcomed me in, and they didn't treat me any different than they treated anybody else, and it's been good. And I now bless the sacrament and reestablish the Aaronic priesthood, and I meet with the bishop on Sunday to schedule meeting with the stake president again to schedule the Melchizedek priesthood, and I'm super excited for that. I got my patriarchal blessing, and everything happens in God's time.
Yeah.
And what he said, everything works together for the good.
Yeah.
I didn't say that. Paul said that.
Yeah.
The Bible verse, my go-to Bible verse that helps me is a double-minded man is unstable in all their ways.
Oh, yeah. That's a proverb.
And it helps me to understand when I'm struggling with something, just pick a path and figure it out from there.
Yep.
But don't stay and be shaky in all your decisions that come after that. Just pick a path. If it's left, go left. If it's right, go right. Don't be scared. Just go.
Yeah.
And that's what I do now. And it's working for me. I met Portia, and we go to speak to kids. We've spoken to the DT, different programs, all the way up to Idaho. It's been amazing. My daughter spends the night at her house, and her daughter spent the night at my house, and
Beautiful.
Pretty cool stuff.
and it's amazing. And here's one thing I do want to tell everybody: like, treatment is amazing. If you're a part of treatment, if you're in treatment, if you're getting treatment, tap into it. Get as much out of it as you can. But once you leave treatment, that doesn't mean that treatment is over.
Nope.
You are going to constantly go through periods in your life where maybe you weren't able to deal with something that you were that is important in treatment, and life will find a way to bring that up.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to prepare yourself for those things. Like, I'm dealing with something like that right now, and maybe we'll get into that after this, but like, it's real. Like, you're going to have to deal with things constantly. The cycle of life is either you're in adversity, coming out of adversity, or going back into adversity.
Right.
And so we tough it out when we're going through struggle. We enjoy the times when we're not in adversity,
Yep.
but we're constantly preparing to go back into it. It's just like the seasons, they're coming.
Yep.
Anybody that struggles with change and you're from Utah, I always tell you, maybe you should view it like the weather changes so much here. Like, how are you struggling with
Hold my
change?
fries sauce. Yeah, piggyback off what you're saying is it's that preparation. So you get out of treatment, you get out of whatever.
Yeah.
It's that preparation that you're doing alone, right?
Right.
You working on you. And I always tell people this, like, my best gift to you two right now, and my best gift to my wife, I say this all the time, is my self-development.
Dope.
If I'm not on my knees in the morning praying, if I'm not reading my self-help books and then taking some time to clear my mind, and I usually do that on bike rides and working out and developing myself, my stoicism, my strength, my ability to see the wickedness in me and push it away when I would come home and I'm tired or hungry and I snap at the kids, and that's my best gift to you guys. So do me a favor, right? And I tell them this is work on yourself, because that's your best gift to me. And that's basically what you said.
I remember when I was in my program, a couple things happened. I looked around at everyone in that group and I said, I care a whole lot about all you, but I care more about myself. And I am so tired of suffering.
Yeah.
And I want to get better for my kids, but I want to get even more better for me. Like, I'm just so tired.
And in doing so, you are better for your husband, your kids, your community.
Right.
You have to be the most important person in your life.
You are.
Yeah, you have to be.
Yeah. And it's not selfish.
No, it isn't.
It's actually
you can give to everyone when you have enough of yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love that.
Or kill yourself trying.
Yeah. We all do that too.
Yep, been there, done that.
Life is good, man.
Where can we find y'all on socials, and how can we get your book? And
yeah, well, I am super easy to find. I do a lot on Facebook. I have an Instagram, but PortiaLouder.com too. I have a website, and there's only one Portia Louder in the world. I have a unique name, so it's easy. Portia Louder, and my books pop up on Amazon, but they're also on my website. And but yeah, if people reach out, I try to respond. I get a lot of messages on Facebook. I do a lot of speaking, and I love doing it, and just connect anywhere I can. So yeah,
she's super inspiring.
Yeah,
she plays such a big role in my family. Her and my wife connect. Her and my daughter connect. Like, when we're struggling with something, we call Portia.
That's awesome.
That feeling's mutual.
Yeah,
that's so cool. I love that relationship.
Yeah.
That is awesome. About you, Manny?
You can find me. Facebook is Manny Misty Lopez. Me and my wife share Facebook, and this was one thing that was important to us when we got into recovery together. Helps keep us safe. It's all recovery based, and that's Manny Misty Lopez. If you want to reach out and see anything on Instagram, it's SL Manny Boy. It's also SL Manny Boy on TikTok, and SL Manny Boy is my YouTube channel where I post the recovery-based hip-hop that I do. I got a show this Saturday at Fit to Recover. Super excited, about to share the stage with Clay and Rufio and Band Again, my original guys from Recovery Day in Ogden for my first performances.
That was fun.
Yeah. And then 4th of July at Toast of the Other Side Academy. Shout out to everything that the Other Side Academy is doing, setting a great example in this community, building. And Recovery Day's coming up. I'll be performing there. And
this will be the first year I'm not emceeing at the Recovery Day.
Really?
Yeah, because I'll be riding my bike to St. George.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same day.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to put on an event in St. George so that when I hit the finish line that we have a little recovery thing going on down there.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's going to be fun. Cool. Any final words? Anything left?
Just thank you for all the good you're doing and inviting us here.
Yeah, I
so cool to
appreciate
meet
it.
you.
Yeah, you too. 100%. Hopefully we can all work together.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Keep rocking.
And anybody out there that's struggling, just understand that you were not alone, that we recover better together.
Amen.
That's why we wear these wristbands. And reach out. That's a huge part of success, is being able to reach out. Other Side Academy says, you alone must do it, but you can't do it alone. Like, that's one of the most true things that I've ever heard.
Yep.
And so get comfortable with that. Whether it's you have a sponsor and you're uncomfortable reaching out to your sponsor, just start reaching out about random things. It doesn't have to be something that you're struggling with.
Yeah, it doesn't have
but
to be
get
when
comfortable.
the bomb hits. It's not our kid, and call if like you just don't feel right.
Right.
Yeah.
Get
it's
comfortable
small.
reaching out.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Yep.
Cool. All right, y'all. Well, thanks for everybody being here. Y'all, thanks for everybody that tuned in. And remember, what do I say at the end? I totally forgot. Don't put yourself in a high-risk situation. Stay strong, work your programs, and remember, we recover better together.